sorry for that interruption. We back on. We're very sorry. The minister will get his time back because he needs to speak to people. We need to know what went on in St. Vincent. We need to know how he felt. We need for him to describe that historic moment that will live on in his life and will be recorded in the history of Guyana. So, Minister Todd, taking up from where Joe left off, what is this, I will call it the Argyle or St. Vincent Declaration? What is this about? What has Guyana achieved? And take all your time and explain it to the viewers, because you were the third most important person defending Guyana Day after the president, and of course the legal mind of the Attorney General, and you as Foreign Minister. The video had the three of you together. You are best, outside of those two persons, to describe what Guyana achieved. When you finish with that, I want you to tell us what it is like in that high level of diplomacy. You were too young to know that the major international diplomatic conference was 1966, when we went to London to achieve independence. I think now the second most important diplomatic achievement in the history of Guyana will be what happened in St. Vincent. And you were right there. Over to you.
Well, thank you, Freddie. And can I address the remarks from Joel first? This is how I'll react to that. I don't know if Lucas was speaking privately or if he was representing the opposition or the opposition leader. As far as I am aware, his name has never appeared anywhere with relations to the case, in relation to the case itself. So maybe he is offering his own personal comments. But let me say this. You're as good as what you know or what you practice. I am not sure that he's an international lawyer. I am not aware that he is competent in international relations or political science. I know that my friend Freddie is a student of political science. I'm a student of international relations, which is a branch of political science. So we're not special, but that's what we read for at university. So we may have an advantage in speaking on these issues. As far as I'm aware, he wrote extensively on fiscal issues, fiscal policies. So it may be more comforting for him to stay within that frame. Coming out of that frame exposes one to the incompetencies. So I will leave it at that. On your question, Freddie, so I do agree with you that the Geneva Agreement, which we signed, when I say we, I'm talking holistically here, Guyana, on the 17th of February 1966, obviously paved the way for dialogue, beginning with the Joint Commission and negotiation, bilateral talks, which have all failed. We've had 27 years of talks. Venezuela has never been able to provide any shred of evidence that the 1899 arbitral award was null and void. And it was the United Nations Secretary General that determined that talks would have failed. And he directed that the International Court of Justice will be the next step in bringing the controversy that Venezuela has with Guyana over the validity of the 1899 arbitral award to a full, perfect, and final completion. Now, we have to understand the frame within which we're operating. And I want your listening audience to understand that we live in a rules-based system. And we can go all the way back to the 15th century with the Treaty of Westphalia, where diplomacy was used to recognize statehood and borders and boundaries. We've had struggles as a, during the various civilizations. We've had the war in Europe. We've had many other wars. We had the First and Second World War, ushering in multilateralism in its greatest sense with the establishment of the United Nations, and we've had the OAS as the most or as the oldest regional institution, and then we got to the proliferation of the globalization phenomenon. Then we had many more regional organizations coming into being. More recently, we've had the CELAC, the Community of Latin American Caribbean countries, which had a key objective in ensuring that from Argentina all the way up to Mexico, incorporating Latin America and the Caribbean, for the three countries to be able to have political coordination, provide peace and stability, to ensure that there is environmental protection, and of course the respect for human rights built into the Charter. So it was really for us in Latin America and the Caribbean, developing countries, to ensure that we can sort our issues out outside of the OAS. Of course, the OAS would include Canada and the United States. So we felt that we have issues that are peculiar to developing countries that we felt that we needed to have a regional organization to treat with that. That is the basis that led to the conversation that we had in St. Vincent. Guyana and Venezuela are both members of CELAC. CARICOM is a sub-regional grouping of CELAC. So what we would have had is a two-pronged approach. Maybe one can say the stars would have aligned for us because currently the Prime Minister of St. Vincent, Prime Minister Ralph Gonsalves, is the current chair of CELAC. And we have also Prime Minister Skerrit from Dominica, who is the current chair of CARICOM. Now, if we're talking peace and stability, and there is a country within Latin America and the Caribbean that is aggressive towards another country. In this case, Venezuela has been very aggressive towards Guyana. Then you have to use your regional mechanisms to ensure that there's dialogue, because we believe that this zone, and we've signed on to it, because if you go back to 2014 in Havana, there was a declaration declaring this region as a zone of peace. So if we have subscribed to that, it therefore means that at the political level, at the highest level, the level of the head of state, that there must be engagement to diffuse any tensions. So what we participated in St. Vincent is basically conforming with what we've signed on to. Venezuela did the same thing. But for us, we know that we're not the aggressor. President Ali had made that very clear to the world that Guyana is not the aggressor. We've made it very clear, detailing the historical facts on the issue. And we have made it very clear that we are going to have a conversation that will not include the matter before the ICJ. It is very clear. We went to Parliament with a motion. Both the opposition and the incumbent agreed to that. President Ali had written to PM Gonsalves, who's the current pro tempore chair of CELAC, reacting to a letter that he had received from President Maduro, in a very unambiguous manner, making it very clear. So President Maduro was very clear that President Ali was only going to engage in talks consequential to the case, and President and PM Gonzalez was also aware of that, as well as the current chair of CARICOM and the other 7 prime ministers that attended and witnessed the conversation, also including the representative that President Lula would have sent. President Lula was also involved in conversations with President Maduro. He sent a delegation to meet with him. President Ali had a bilateral with him, and he spoke with him on several occasions. So it was very clear what was Guyana's intentions. It was very clear to Venezuela. It was very clear to the members of CELAC, and it was very clear to the members of CARICOM. And you would recall both Joel and Freddie looking at the statements coming out of CARICOM, looking at the statements coming out of the Commonwealth from our traditional partners, that we were not going to engage in any conversation on the matter before the court. So for us, it was conforming to the principles of the CELAC Charter and also conforming to CARICOM. Because you have to understand that a threat to Guyana is also a threat to CARICOM. That is our most viable alternative when it comes to regionalism. CARICOM is not only our present but our future. CELAC is very important to us as well because the rest of the world does not separate Latin America from the Caribbean anymore. That is long gone with. When the rest of the world looks at this region, they see Latin America and the Caribbean as one. They are cousins. We are working towards getting to know each other better and to work with each other even better, because in a very globalized and an unpredictable environment, you have to be able to have regional institutions and mechanisms in place where you can have peace, stability, economic prosperity, and social advancement. That is what we're all here to achieve. And President Ali had made it very clear in his submission during the meeting that the purpose of the meeting was to ensure that the people of Venezuela can achieve prosperity, peace and prosperity, and the people of Guyana can achieve peace and prosperity, and that also we can have good neighborly relations. As you know, you don't get to choose your neighbors. It's permanent. Our interests may diverge, but we have to work towards having mutual interest, mutual respect, mutual understanding. And I think that was what we achieved. And I think it was mutually beneficial for both Guyana, Venezuela, and by extension, CARICOM and the rest of the region. It was there to broker peace, especially from the aggression that we were facing from Venezuela, even before the referendum. We've had incursions more recently from 2020, 2021. We've had incursions. We've had our boats being seized. I've had conversations with the current Foreign Minister, Arias, at that time, to defuse the matter. We've had military craft coming into our space. So we've had other skirmishes that we were able to defuse, but this was the highest level of threat that we've ever faced. And coming out of the referendum, we also had other steps that President Maduro would have taken to reinforce the aggression. So it was necessary, under the umbrella of CELAC and the sub-regional grouping of CARICOM, to engage, because the world is a better place when you talk. Oftentimes diplomacy can be slow, but I think in this case we were able to get to that place in a very timely manner, and I think it was mutually beneficial, and it, to a large extent, or I should say, it was a win-win for both Venezuela, Guyana, and the rest of the region.
Sure.
Minister, I think what you've done there was very excellently articulated, eloquently, and you have beautifully dispelled in a very simple and a humble way all of the negative commentary from the keyboard warriors. So with what you have just delivered there, I think it is of great value to the viewers and by extension the country. So I don't even want to dwell on the negativity and ask you to respond to anything at this point. So let's now shift the conversation. You've had on the day of the dialogue, on the day when it took place, you have had the opportunity to be present in the room. What was the temperature like? And I'm coming with this question from the perspective of where do we go from here? So what was the temperature like in the room? What was your assessment of Maduro? Do you think he would honor those commitments? Of course, we need to still be on guard. We still need to take precautionary measures, but share a little bit of insight and where we go from here.
Okay, so I think Guyana and Venezuela has a history of good neighborly relations. It's not as if we were hostile neighbors for decades. We've had, of course, our issues, but we've always managed to maintain very good neighborly relations with Venezuela. And I can say that especially under the People's Progressive Party administration. You can go back to Dr. Chetty Jagan. You can fast forward to Bar Jagan when he was president. He had very cordial and very good relations with the then President Chavez, and we had good relations with President Maduro as well up until 2015. At the end of the day, and you will know, Freddie, because you're a student of politics, diplomacy oftentimes is very personal, and when heads of state meet, if they hit it off, it works. If they don't hit it off, it can be very problematic, and then you have to have your technical people and your diplomatic circle trying to work things out. I think what we've been very fortunate for in the People's Progressive Party civic that we've always had presidents that were very good at international diplomacy, which obviously makes the work easier for the foreign minister and for the foreign ministry and for the regional community as well. So let me go to the room itself. President Maduro came into that room knowing very well that he had enjoyed very good relations with Guyana. I can tell you he has great respect for President Ali, and it's mutual. So when the two heads of state met, it was out of respect because you have a nation behind you. President Ali, of course, was very firm when he had to be. He's very diplomatic when he had to be diplomatic. And he was very, I should say, he was good at the craft of engaging with another head of state. And of course, President Maduro would have seen that. You're seeing someone who is here to represent their country, who has the facts, who can back it up, who can rebut, who can provide you with evidence that can counter what you would have said. And basically, it's all about your head of state articulating on behalf of your people. And I think it was well received. You're not going to agree on everything because, of course, we know going into the meeting that Venezuela has a position that may not change. We hope it will change, but it may not change. But that does not mean that you should not engage. And even though we know that Venezuela has a position that we don't agree with, we have a position that they don't agree with. But what is comforting for us is that our position is in line with the rule of international law, and the rest of the democratic world is on that side. So we happen to be on the right side of both history and the rule of international law, which makes it very easy for a country that is a growing democracy. So we did not go into that meeting with a very low political capital nationally nor internationally. President Ali went into that meeting at an all-time high as president of Guyana and as a global player. So everything that we did and what the president did in terms of representation, whether it was on the facts of the case, other matters relating or consequential, he was very clear, I should say unambiguous, and it was well received and respected by President Maduro and his team. And that is why we were able to get a joint statement in less than 12 hours. I mean, if you think about it, countries take years even to get to the table to sit down and talk, and even more time to get an agreement in black and white. We did that in less than 12 hours. And because there was a willingness on either side to ensure that we have peace. And if you look at the title of the joint declaration, it's about peace. Venezuela wants peace. We want peace. What is clear as well, and the president said that here, he said that most of his engagements related to the subject area, we're not the aggressor. But the president, as the head of state, as the head of government, as the commander-in-chief, has a responsibility to ensure that we're able to preserve and protect our sovereignty and territorial integrity. And he made it very clear that meeting that Guyana is not the aggressor, and we will continue to ensure that we explore all options to ensure that we can protect ourselves. That is fundamental. It's fundamental because, as you will know, Freddie, and you will know also, Joel, that in the international system, it's all about self-help. You have to help yourself. Of course, you want partners to be on your side to give you support, but the president has a mandate. He was elected not only to provide economic prosperity and social advancement, but he was also elected to ensure that he keep us safe. And I think that meeting is testimony to the fact that he has fulfilled his mandate, which he was elected to do.
Could you, I know you're not a psychologist, you're a
No, I'm
social
not. I'm
scientist.
far from that.
When he came into the room, you were sitting, of course, and you were across the table. What was his temperament like, Maduro? Was he agitated throughout the meeting? Were there moments of serenity in him and friendliness? Or was he one stiff man that did what he had to do in compliance with what was around the table? 7 CARICOM prime ministers, the advisor to one of the biggest, most powerful countries in the world, Brazil. So were there moments in which you see this guy relax and something good is going to come out? Or was he the embodiment of stiffness and discomfort?
Let me put it this way, and you know His Excellency the President. He's a people's person.
I'm talking about Maduro.
Oh, Maduro.
Yeah.
President Maduro is a very seasoned politician. He was schooled by President Chavez, who is revered within the region. So he's well schooled. And you have to understand, his actions and the rhetoric that he will use when he's in Venezuela, when he's speaking to his constituency and the people of Venezuela, it's not the same that you'll bring to that level of engagement. Politicians will have to
So you appeared comfortable
be a
with the
chameleon
meeting?
in some ways.
You appeared comfortable?
He appeared comfortable.
Because there was this handshake in which it went viral. There was this handshake, and knowing our president, is one thing you can say about Ali. Ali is very self-confident. And I think that explains why, to date, from Premier Jagan in 1957 to now, he has traveled more in terms of his time in office around this country than any other head of state, British Guyana. He's a self-confident man. And so he looked Maduro and was shaking Maduro's hands. Maduro shook his hands, but the thing that went viral is Maduro wasn't looking, was kind of looking sideways. What was that all about? You were there, you saw that.
I'm not sure that I captured that. The lenses are faster than I am. So it's the frame. I can't say which frame they used, but I can tell you that the mood was very just intimate, and there's a certain level of civility among heads of state as well. You have to understand. Two heads of state are meeting. You're there to represent your country. You're not there to rile up your people. You're there to have a high level dialogue. And you have other heads of government in the meeting. You have the personal representative and envoy to President Lula. You've had the chef de cabinet of the UN Secretary General, along with the Undersecretary for Political Affairs.
That was a Jamaican guy, right?
He's a Jamaican guy. He used to be the PR in New York, I believe. So you're at a level where you have to play at, and you're not going to come in there saying what you see at home. You're coming to take something home back to your people to say, well, we did it. So it's a different attitude, it's a different posture, and there's a different level of respect and civility that is required of any head of state. We did not go there to broker war. We were there to ensure that there's peace, and I'm almost certain that President Maduro was there to find a way to go back home to his people, to say, well, we don't have to use aggression. And I think it's a win-win for either side. And we went into the meeting, obviously, in my view, with greater capital, because we're a peaceful nation, we're law-abiding, we respect the rule of international law, and we've seen that with all of our actions and all that we've done in terms of pursuing this matter to ensure that we have a peaceful resolution. And we believe firmly that the 1899 arbitral award was perfect, final, and complete. And given the fact that Venezuela has a controversy of the validity of that 1899 award, that it is properly placed within the ICJ, where we're both members of, because we're ipso facto members of the ICJ by virtue of being members of the United Nations. So, and the ICJ would have ruled twice in favor of the matters we would have brought before. Well, we've ruled twice in favor of Guyana, one on the jurisdiction, and there was one on admissibility, because the contention of Venezuela was the fact that they felt that the United Kingdom should have been a party to the case because we were a colony still. But the court ruled that no. The two parties in this case would be now the Bolivarian Republic, formerly the United States of Venezuela, and now Guyana. And with the provisional measures, of course, it's clear that the ICJ ruled that the status quo remains. We have administrative responsibility over the Essequibo region, and both countries should desist from engaging in any aggressive activities. So it's not that they're not paying attention to what the ICJ has ruled, well, in this case, in three instances, they're paying attention. They want to be able to straddle both sides of the spectrum. To engage the ICJ when they think it's necessary for them to engage, and then to reject the ICJ on the substance of the case itself in terms of the merits. But at the end of the day, Freddie and Joel, this is a rules-based international order. This is how we solve disputes. And going back to the word dispute, it's a legal terminology. Courts resolve disputes. So if you see disputes, and in this case, in the Joint Declaration, the disputes were in uplifted commas. It means it was lifted from another document. It came from the provisional measures.
And that is consistent with my interpretation.
And that's okay. Yeah. So you should tell Mr. Lucas when you see him, enlighten him a bit.
I've never seen him, but we've had several exchanges in the press.
Oh, you should have a coffee with him.
So I described it as a transposition. The word dispute is transposed from the ICJ to. Importantly, on that note, coming out of the declaration, there is a commitment for another round of dialogue in Brazil. I think 3 months from now. Before the dialogue took place, many persons, particularly opposition aligned, but not within the opposition, but more opposition supporters. Maybe I shouldn't categorize them, but it's a fact. They've largely opposed the dialogue on the basis that what should be the outcome. Now, in my readings, I'm no expert in international relations, but in my readings on global politics and geopolitics, I've listened to two very renowned scholars internationally, globally, who are experts in geopolitics, who argued that the war, one of the primary reasons why the war between Russia and Ukraine started was because there was no dialogue. One party wanted to have dialogue, and that never happened. And hence, that is how things escalated. Using that now, and considering our case, we have been wise enough to go into dialogue, and that was the objective. What's your take on that?
Well, let me first begin by saying that the historical context is dissimilar in terms of that side of the world and Guyana. So in the case of Guyana and Venezuela, Venezuela has never had administrative authority over the Essequibo region. All right. If you look at it historically, they've never had that administrative responsibility. If you go to Essequibo region, people speak English. Always have. Since the British came, they pay their taxes to the government of Guyana. They vote in our national elections. They carry our passports, and they consider themselves Guyanese. In that side of the world, that was an empire. So what is happening between Russia and Ukraine? It's a family affair. They're cousins, brothers, and sisters. Some sections of Ukraine speak Russian. In our case, it's a different situation. We were part of an empire. We were part of the British Empire. Venezuela was part of the Spanish Empire. Of course, Venezuela gained independence in the 1820s. We got independence in 1966. But so it's dissimilar. What Venezuela has attempted to do is to expand its territory. They did that with claiming out of Gran Colombia. They've also claimed territory from Dominica, which is 350 miles away from Trinidad and Tobago as well. So they've always been in the quest on expansionism, which is frowned upon in the 21st century. The time for expansionism is long gone, and that is why we have a lot of lessons that we'd have learned from the Second World War, and that is why multilateralism is very important. The United Nations was established to bring peace and stability in Europe in the first instance, for the rest of the world. The Bretton Woods agreements were also designed to finance infrastructure in Europe and to finance Europe out of financial crises, and that was extended to the rest of the world, because the world, we have more countries now. Back in the 1940s, when the United Nations was established, we had very few nation states. We still had empires. Now we have nation states. We have to get along. We have 193 nation states now. So you can understand the complexities. We are pushing ahead with ensuring that we have peaceful relations with our neighbors. That's our primary objective in terms of foreign policy. Our eastern neighbor, Suriname, our western neighbor, Venezuela, and our southern neighbor, Brazil. And we maintain that. And we've always done everything within the confines of international law to ensure that we have peaceful relations with our neighbors. And we've done well. And I can say we've done well as a nation, but I also dare say that we've done extremely well under every People's Progressive Party civic administration.
Let's talk about the dichotomy, and let me hear your views on that. There's a dichotomy. Maduro was saber-rattling, he was aggressive. After the referendum, he's sharing out, creating administrators for the region of Essequibo. The security advisor to the president was here on Monday, and he said, from the time the referendum was planned and the saber-rattling, Jerry Guevara, was a bit worried. Now, this guy, after the referendum, decided he can parcel out licenses for Essequibo, etc. And then you had the anticlimax, the St. Vincent meeting, and he gave assurance that, look, we would not invade Guyana, we respect international. I'm asking you, do you think that people, including Lula, President Lula, and a few CARICOM heads, read the riot act to Maduro and said, what are you doing? What have you been doing? You can't do this in a zone of peace. You can't do this. You think world powers would allow you to just go and take over a small, peaceful nation like this? I think a few powerful people, but particularly President Lula, read the riot act to him. And therefore you have the dichotomy. Saber-rattling, a referendum, saber-rattling, continue. And then St. Vincent and Maduro said, Venezuela would not intervene, there'll be no use of violence, and there's a commission to talk.
I don't know if I can say the riot act.
But
I can say...
No, as a diplomat, you would not use the riot act. No, you have to use diplomatic language. He was told.
I can say that is...
He was advised.
Diplomacy at its best. And we've always, in this region, we've always been very firm on dialogue and diplomacy, which is very important, because we can get things wrong. We can misread another head of state. But when you get dialogue, you get clarity, and you're able to resolve your matters peacefully. And that is the intention of Brazil under President Lula. That is clearly our intention. That is the intention of the heads of government and head of state of CELAC, and the head of state and government, and the head of government, heads of government of CARICOM. We don't want any aggression in this region, Freddie. This region is still behind globally on all of the indicators. And with COVID, you've seen the decline within this region. This region has to rebuild itself, and we need peace to do that. You cannot have peace and prosperity at the same time. So it was important for the diplomatic channels to kick in, for dialogue, and for that meeting in St. Vincent, because it's a threat against Guyana. It's a threat also to CARICOM. It's a destabilization of the region. I don't think anyone wants that in this region. We don't have a history of that. This is not the only controversy that we have within the continent and the region. We have several controversies within the continent and by extension Latin America. But it's still, quote unquote, a relatively stable and peaceful environment as compared to other parts of the world. And we need to maintain that, because we always believe that we can resolve our issues peacefully through diplomacy, through the courts. And that is how you operate in the 21st century, because you have to be able to still cater for not only this generation, but the generations to come. It's not about us here. We're here to provide a better standard of living and quality of life for the people now, so that it can be perpetual. We want to be able to create a virtuous cycle here in Guyana and by extension the region. And the president made it very clear that our prosperity is not only for Guyana. Our prosperity is also the prosperity of the region. We want to ensure that the Guyana Shield is not only food secured, but we have climate security, we have energy security. Venezuela is also aware of that, because they're following our internal politics. They're following the media here in Guyana and everything coming out of the media. They're following everything coming out of, how do I put it? Specialists and people who may think that they have authority on issues. So they're following everything. It's not that they're isolated. They're following everything. So we have to understand that we live in a world that is
we're full of specialists in Guyana.
We live in a world that time and space distanciation, and also you have a world that is borderless. So everything that we see and do now, people are looking at it live. Maybe you have people in Venezuela looking at your show. So we have to ensure that we are responsible. It's not only for elected representatives. It's not just about the president and his cabinet and the government that he leads, but it's also the legislation, because the opposition sits within that branch of government, the legislature, the second arm of government. So they also have to be responsible. So we all have a responsibility to ensure that this issue, that we all are committed, that we all understand it first and foremost, and that we're able to articulate it in such a manner that we're all on the same page. There's no winner on this. We're all winners once we're on the same page. We don't need a hero on this case. This is not about us. This is about the future of Guyana. We've been going on with this for 57 years. How long more can we go on like this? We need to be able to allow not the next generation or the other generation, but we have to ensure that we provide a very good pathway for even the unborn. And that is how President Ali is planning. The 2030 and beyond is about economic independence. Beyond that, we need to have continuity. So we have to have national objectives that are bipartisan, that we can work towards uplifting the people of Guyana. You compete when it's time to compete, because every 5 years, which is a very short cycle, you have to go back to the people for another mandate. So we have to be able to prioritize, and we have to be able to be smart and wise about what we're doing. to ensure that we don't jeopardize our nationhood, and to ensure that whatever competition we have politically, that it is contained based on our ability to provide a better policy framework, better measures. But when it comes to preserving and protecting our sovereignty and territorial integrity, there should not be any competition for that.
I want to ask you, Joel, if you want to go.
I don't know how much more time we have.
But the operator hasn't told us yet. We have to get 8 minutes. We have to get 10 minutes back. So
you're multitasking.
On that note that you ended, I just wanted to draw your attention. I see you stayed away from it. I want to bring you directly to it.
He's a diplomat.
The Attorney General reported that President Maduro had with him volumes of compilation of media reports, commentaries, critiques, and everything. And for a long time, I've observed it because I studied the Venezuela Exxon case. I studied Venezuela as well, social and economic situation and political. So I know a little bit about their economic history. And I saw, before all of this happened, a pattern by a certain group of proponents or a certain group of critics of government. What is your take on that? That compilation, the Attorney General spoke on it. He gave his take. He did an interview yesterday. Do you have anything to add to that, in addition to the Attorney General, from your portfolio's perspective?
I'm not sure I can add to what he would have said, but I did see President Maduro with a stack of files. He didn't share it with us, so we don't know what's the content. But of course, what he had to say was very predictable because we are very versed on the issue and their position and their views on the issue as well, all of which are not grounded in a legal basis or fact. All of it is rhetoric. A lot of it is an unhealthy distraction for politicians across the spectrum, and that's the only issue that they tend to rally around the flag on, which I think is doing a disservice to the people of Venezuela. I think they need to move on. I don't think that it's good for a nation where you're laying claim to another country's territory that you have there's no basis in fact or in law. So I think that it's good that we're at this juncture, because I believe that it's important for us to have this matter brought to an end. Of course, bringing it to an end, and that is to say that when the ICJ rules, we are cautiously optimistic, of course, based on our case and our representation and what we've submitted, that we will have a ruling that will be in our favor. But that does not stop Venezuela from not accepting it. But at the end of the day, it is the rule of international law. So Venezuela will obviously isolate themselves even more if they do not accept the ruling of the ICJ. But what it does for them is that it gives them a way out where they can focus more on other priorities, because this is not a priority for Venezuela. This is a distraction. And we have never really focused on the PR on this issue, because for us the matter has been settled and we were basically trying to move on with building this country. But I think we had to really get involved, because I think, if the one who speaks the most, they're the ones that people are listening to. So we had to get involved to ensure that we reach out to all of our friends, all of our partners. The president has been busy. The foreign ministry has been busy as well. and I think we were able to really inform the international community on the issue, because at the end of the day, Freddie and Joel, it's about self-interest. So while we may believe that other nation states are aware of the issues, they may not be aware of the issues. Maybe the representatives who are in office today are not aware of the issues. We may assume that they're aware because they're in office, but oftentimes they're not aware. I'm seeing that, having conversations with representatives from other countries, and you can tell that they're not aware, but that's not a priority for them because it's not within their national interest. Of course, when it gets to the point where it's a regional priority now, people are now trying to get involved because obviously within the region, if Venezuela is that aggressive towards Guyana, it becomes a concern for the rest of the region. And that is why CELAC, the machinery of CELAC, kicked in, because it got to a point where heads of state and of government within the region started to realize that we have to be able to find a way to resolve this matter, to bring peace between Guyana and Venezuela, because it's not good for the region. So while it was a painful exercise, I think it's a lesson learned for the rest of the region, and I think we have displayed to the rest of the world as well that you can find peace through dialogue and diplomacy.
Freddie, before you go, you made an important point that I want to amplify for the benefit of the readers. You said
the readers?
Sorry, the viewers.
He's a reader. He's a reader.
I'm accustomed writing.
He's a reader. No, he's a reader. He's a reader. That's good.
I want to, for the viewers, I would like to amplify an important point you made for the benefit of the viewers and the country at large. You said that this is not a priority for Venezuela, and this is they have placed heavy emphasis on the PR aspect. Now, and I'm very happy, I'm extremely happy that the contents of that compilation, that document that Maduro had with him, that the Attorney General reported what was observed. Because I tell you what, when the video started to surface in social media, my wife called me and she was nervous. I said, "What happened?" She said, you see Maduro?" I said, "What happened?" "Yeah, you saw Maduro brought all his history books, and when I look at President Ali, his document is not as thick as Maduro, meaning that Maduro come well prepared." So I'm sure that was the thought went through the minds of many other persons who observed. So it is very important, and very happy that the contents of that document was observed and reported on, which unfortunately it's a compilation of our own local media reports and not anything of substance. So I wanted to amplify that point on the PR aspect of it for people to understand.
There was frenetic, that's the best word to use. I think that's appropriate. There's frenetic diplomatic activity from the time Maduro spoke about a referendum. I don't know if you want to give out this, but it's a question that has to be asked. In all these foreign ministers and these international people that you met, there was assurance that, look, Venezuela can't invade Guyana. You got that assurance from people saying, look, we with you, we're looking into this thing, but be assured, he can't do that. You got that assurance from one part of the globe to another?
No, I don't think we got that assurance. I think, and you're a student of international relations, and if you follow Hobbes, man is not inherently benevolent. You really can't get into the minds of leaders who have become unpredictable, especially when you're not following the rule of law. So for us, we were always very cautious. Of course, we know that war is very expensive. We know that maintaining, occupying, and settling, it's a daunting undertaking because it's you have to finance it. But notwithstanding that, you really can't determine how a world leader may act or react, especially when um, their country is in such a shape. If you think about it, Venezuela had what 7.3 million, um, I should say, migrants in Venezuela who would have left. If you take that in context, you're talking about the entire CARICOM community drained, plus 1.3 million from, well, if you include Haiti, 1.3 million from Haiti. So that's 6 million from the Bahamas all the way down to Guyana and Suriname, empty. You get up tomorrow morning and there's no CARICOM. And then you go to Haiti and 1.3 million have left. That is the extent to which persons would have left, right? And at the same time, if you look at world history and of course you study philosophy and looking at all the theories, I mean, if someone is moving towards authoritarianism, you really can't predict their next move because it's not in line with democratic principles, values, and norms, and that is what we subscribe to, and that is why the president is very firm on building the institutions out in Guyana, the democratic institutions, and ensuring that he's a leader that is responsible, that is accountable, and that we have good governance. Because once you operate within the confines of the law and you commit to democratic principles and values, then you won't have any need to worry. You just need to start working on your competitive advantage and social advancement because the path is cleared. If you're treating with another country that is, you have failing democratic institutions and you have movement away from democratic principles and values, then you really can't see what can happen next. So for us, the focus for us was on ensuring that we can preserve and maintain our sovereignty and territorial integrity, and that is what the president was focusing on, not so much on President Maduro and what he was doing internally, because his interest is to ensure that we here in Ghana, we are safe and we are protected.
Okay, Prime Minister, I think you'll have to take some money out of your pocket because our operator said we're 10 minutes beyond time, which means you don't want to be involved with industrial violation. You have to pay the young man. But we got to go. I want to just to tell you something before you go. Do you know, and then we'll leave on that note, do you know since independence, you're the youngest foreign minister to hold the job? Do you know that? You're aware of that?
No,
you're not aware of that?
I've not done that research.
You haven't done that? Well, research it. There's Shedat Ramphal, there's Fred Wills, Clement Rohe, Ashley Jackson. I don't think they're... So you've notched up...
all distinguished.
You've notched up a record there. Thanks for coming. I
might also add the president is very young. He's younger than I am.
I'm talking about the foreign ministry. When you're going out the door, please pay the young man his extra, his overtime job. Look, I want to have you back, sir, to talk about Guyana's foreign policy. How many new embassies are coming? Which one will be from the Middle East and what have you? Joel, thanks for short notice, and thanks for the extremely short notice. I was discourteous to you, but I know you are damn. Make sure you recommend your tailor to Joel.
No, he's dapper. Don't worry.
Thanks for being with us. We had some hiccups, but we got back our time. Our guest was the Honorable Member of Parliament and Foreign Minister of Guyana, Honorary Hugh Todd. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you on Friday. As I normally say,